You have questions? The Bible has answers. This program, overseen by the Phillips Street Church of Christ, is dedicated to answering your questions with God's Word. Please join us for the period of study as we seek to give a Bible answer. And now, here is your moderator.
Hello everyone, welcome to A Bible Answer. My name is Mike McDaniel. I'm the preacher for the Central Church of Christ in Caruthersville, Missouri. This program is overseen by the good elders of the Phillips Street Church of Christ in Dyersburg, Tennessee, financially supported by 62 congregations of the Churches of Christ all throughout this region. We're glad you're watching today. We got 3 gospel preachers that have been with us all this month to answer your questions. We'll have them introduce themselves to you once again.
Hello, my name is Russell Kline. I'm the preacher for the Madisonville Church of Christ in Madisonville, Kentucky.
I am Keith Olbricht. I preach at the Shady Acres Church of Christ in Sikeston, Missouri.
Hello, my name is Joe Rhodes. I am the minister at the Camden Church of Christ in Camden, Tennessee.
Well, I was telling our brethren today before we began taping, today is my birthday, and how ironic it would be on my birthday that we would be celebrating our 20th anniversary of A Bible Answer. A Bible Answer began Memorial Day weekend of 2004, and here we are, May the 26th, 2024. Thanks to everyone who have made that possible for us to be on the air for 20 years. Now, with our brethren today and others who have been with us who have served as panelists, I did some research yesterday, went back over 20 years of A Bible Answer, and I counted 124 gospel preachers who have appeared on A Bible Answer in the last 20 years. Without those preachers serving as panelists, of course, A Bible Answer would not operate. And so we're grateful not only to the brethren today, but also all of those over the years who have contributed to the success of this program. And now to our questions for today. To Brother Keith Olbricht, what are some passages that deal with the financial support of preachers of the gospel? Do brethren have the right to offer him a very meager support? Brother Olbricht.
Well, happy birthday, Mike, and thank you very much for this question. When we look at this idea, we really need to go back to the Old Testament to sort of get the root of what we are discussing in this question. When God brought the children of Israel from the land of Egypt and gave them the law of Moses out at Mount Sinai, He included in that law provisions for the Levites. He knew that the tribe of Levi was going to serve as the keepers of the tabernacle, and they were the ones who were going to oversee the sacrifices and the spiritual rites of the law of Moses. And so he also knew that when they entered into the promised land and they began dividing the land up among the various tribes, that Levi was not going to be given a designated portion of land. They were to be given certain cities scattered throughout the land of Canaan, and they would be given various parcels of land around various cities, but there was not going to be a territory that was their own. God intended for them to be supported through the work that they would be doing. And while it is true that there are some of the sacrifices that were offered under the law of Moses that were to be completely consumed in that sacrificial fire, many of the sacrifices, a portion of what was offered was given to the priests and to the Levites, and that was sort of the salary, if you will, for their service. It enabled them to live and to live well in their service to God. Now, I say all of that to set the stage for what Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 9. Because Paul says in 1 Corinthians 9 in verses 13 and 14, Do you not know that those who minister the holy things eat of the things of the temple, and those who serve at the altar partake of the offerings of the altar? Even so, the Lord has commanded that those who preach the gospel should live from the gospel. Okay, so what's going on in 1 Corinthians 9? Well, Paul is having to defend his apostleship. There were some, the argument is that there were some who were saying, well, Paul, when he was among us here in the city of Corinth, he didn't charge us anything. We didn't pay him anything. And if he were a real apostle, surely he would have charged us for what he did and for what he said. But Paul didn't do that, therefore Paul could not be a real apostle. That was the argument that was there. And so Paul here in 1 Corinthians 9 is giving an answer to that. But let's go back to verse 7 of 1 Corinthians 9, because a few verses earlier, and Paul makes this statement. He says, whoever goes to war at his own expense, who plants a vineyard and does not eat of its fruit, or who tends a flock and does not drink of the milk of the flock? Do I say these things as a mere man, or does not the law say the same also? For it is written in the law of Moses, you shall not muzzle the ox while it treads out the grain. Is it oxen God is concerned about? Paul goes there to that passage, and we can go on in the verses that follow, but he quotes from really what is kind of an obscure passage in Deuteronomy chapter 25 and verse 4. Moses is directing the people about disputes that they might have among one another, and just some common sense how to treat one another and to deal with one another. And he makes that statement about not muzzling the ox while it treads out the corn. Well, that becomes the basis for what Paul says regarding should the preacher be paid. And Paul even takes it a step further in First Timothy chapter 5. He quotes the same passage in verse 18, but he's talking in verse 17 about elders who rule among you. And he says they should be counted worthy of double honor, especially those who labor in the word and in the doctrine. And so that principle is used to show that, yes, those who are laboring in the gospel, whether they are preachers or whether they are laboring as elders within the local congregation, that truly the laborer is worthy of his wages. Now, the latter part of the question that was asked is, do brethren have the right to offer him a very meager support? And we all know of instances where that has happened, and I'm trying to tread a very fine line being a preacher in talking about this situation, but the principle that God has established is that no, the bare minimum isn't what He is expecting or looking for. We could also argue that exorbitant is not what God is looking for. So let's take the principles that we find within the Scriptures and let's use some Bible common sense when it comes to these discussions. Let's not do too much, but certainly let's be careful that we are not doing too little either. Thank you for this question.
Thank you. To Brother Rhodes, in 1 Timothy 2:13 and 15, what does Paul mean when he says women will be saved through childbearing? Brother Rhodes.
Really enjoyed this question, and you may notice a smile on my face. It is because I have been stepping in to fill in to teach the ladies' Bible class on Tuesday mornings at Camden Church of Christ. And my first topic for the ladies' Bible class was childbearing. That was a tough class. The second class I filled in for was covering the book of the Song of Solomon. So also very interesting to cover in a ladies' Bible class. But let's get back to the question in First Timothy chapter 2, verses 13, 14, and 15. Let me read that to you. For Adam was formed first, then Eve, and Adam was not deceived, but the woman was deceived and became a transgressor. Yet she will be saved through childbearing if they continue in faith and love and holiness with self-control. Now, in 1 Timothy chapter 2, verses 13, 14, and 15, Paul he addresses the role of women within the context of Christian worship. So let's kind of look at those verses quickly. Verse 13 emphasizes the order of creation. Adam was formed first, and then Eve. This highlights the priority of Adam's creation in God's design. Verse 14 clarifies that Adam was not deceived during the fall. It was Eve who was deceived and became a sinner. Now, we must mention that Adam was not off toiling in the garden somewhere. The scripture tells us in Genesis that Eve turned to him and he did eat. But that underscores the responsibility of Eve that she bore in the events that took place in the garden. Now, verse 15, Paul addresses the question, how can women today avoid the same mistakes that were made by Eve in the garden? And he makes this statement, women will be saved through childbearing if they continue in faith and love and with holiness with propriety. So it's essential to understand the statement in the context of what Paul is saying. Paul is not suggesting that salvation is exclusively tied to childbirth, child rearing. He likely is referring to the faithful fulfillment of their God-given roles as Christian women, including motherhood. And the emphasis is really on faithfulness, not the specific act of childbirth. Paul is not saying if you don't have children, then you can't be holy before God. He emphasizes and encourages women to live out their faith, to live out their love, and to live out their holiness unto God. In doing so, they are recognizing the unique roles that God has given them as women, as believers in Christ. So the reference to childbearing symbolizes faithfulness, symbolizes obedience rather than a literal pathway to salvation. So we need to go back and we need to look at, in context, the Roman world. Women were considered to be intellectually second class. So it was widely accepted that females were academically inferior. The education system was designed primarily for men and not for women. They had an inferior legal status. Women in the Roman Empire were to bear and raise children. And that's just a small taste of the life of a woman in the Roman Empire. Now, Paul explains by pointing back to Adam and pointing back to Eve, the creation and the sin, but we need to understand why he does this. And so this is where we see Eve step out of her God-given role. And Adam stepped out of his God-given role. In other words, Eve took charge instead of Adam taking charge. And that's a reversal of the order in which God had created man and woman. He created Adam out of the dust of the ground and created Eve from taking the rib from the side of Adam. So we need to consider how that is important in today's. So the reality is, when we look in our culture today, how does God want us to live in our culture? Our culture is a cancel society. Cancel culture society is tough for me to say. But if we look around and we look at the suppression and we look at the abuse and the sexualization and the manipulation that's going on between men and women, we see that God has an order. The media, social media and news media glorifies the battle that's going on between men and women rather than encouraging men and women to just work together as God designed for us to do as his creation. And so it's important that Paul doesn't ground the truth about men, he doesn't ground the truth about women in this passage based on the culture, but on Genesis, in the book of Genesis. And so verse 15, what it does is it pictures the reversal. Remember, we said that the women in Roman Empire their value was only in having children. And so Paul wants to elevate this. And so bearing children was a part of their creation purpose and part of their joy in being a woman. So sin brought death into the world, and the woman reverses the curse by bringing life into the world. And it's so special what a woman is able to do when she nurtures and protects and brings life into the world. She's pictured as being saved through her unique, God-given, designed role. That's not saying women who are to be confined to the home. That's not declaring that women are only good for childbearing. God is glorifying and proclaiming praise for the special work that women do. And so we've got to remember that from woman would eventually come Jesus the Christ. And so Paul proclaims a unique role for men. He proclaims a unique role for women, neither of which are to be downgraded or degraded in any way. Women are pictured in context as givers of life, the life not eternal, but the life here on earth. And so the life of a Christian woman is to be lived out how? In faith and love and holiness. Paul goes back to verse 10 and says that she lets her good works for the Lord be on display. And so it comes to a question of faithfulness and obedience to God, not the actual act of childbirth that is going to save a woman, but her unique God-given role for having children, for bringing life, the reversal of Eve bringing sin into the world. The reversal is mothers will be saved through childbearing, bringing life into the world. I appreciate this question very much.
Thank you, and a good job there. We've reached the halfway point of our program today, and we want to offer to you a free tract. Our tract today is entitled, Overcoming the Challenges Blended Families Face. If you'd like to have this tract, or if you'd like to have our Bible correspondence course on the Church of the Bible, you're seeing there Lesson 8, or if you'd like to send us your question, just contact us. All you have to do is write us at Phillips Street Church of Christ, 912 Phillips Street, Dyersburg, Tennessee, 38024. You can reach us by our website, www.abibleanswertv.org. You can reach us by email at abibleanswer@earthlink.net, or you can call our toll-free number, 1-800-436-0463. We have a number of people that contact me, and they are watching a Bible Answer on YouTube. Be sure and tell other people that you can find us on YouTube. Just look for a Bible Answer TV, and be sure to hit the subscribe button. We love new subscribers at a Bible Answer. Now to Russell Kline for our next question on a Bible Answer. Please discuss Matthew 27:52 through 53. The person says, I understand that none will be coming from the grave until the end of time for the judgment. Brother Kline.
I appreciate this question very much, and appreciate the spirit with which it was asked. This verse that is cited here appears within the context of the death of Jesus on the cross. Specifically, it describes some things that happened immediately after he died. Verse 50, Jesus cried out again with a loud voice and yielded up his spirit. Then verse 51, behold, the veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth quaked, and the rocks were split. And the graves were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised, and coming out of the graves after his resurrection. And they went into the holy city and appeared to many. This is a very curious incident that takes place during the death of Christ, something that I think sometimes gets maybe glossed over and not really noticed as much as it should. When Jesus died, there were many supernatural things that happened in association with that event. There was the period of darkness that came upon that part of the earth at that time. There was the mention just a moment ago of the veil in the temple being torn in two. there was a great earthquake, so strong that rocks were split asunder. And evidently, as part of the earthquake, there were many graves in the necropolis of Jerusalem that were opened. And from those open graves came people who had been raised from the dead by the power of God. Now, we might be inclined to wonder, why? Why was that one of the signs that was given? And we can speculate all day long about what God's motives may or may not have been. But you do at least have to admit that in these things that happened surrounding the death of Jesus, there is a great deal of miraculous power that is on display. And there can be no doubt at all about what's happening and who it is that's behind it. Resurrection from the dead is something that is possible only by the power of God. It's not something that can happen in any other way. I know that there are people in the modern world who said, well, I was dead on the operating table for X number of minutes, and then I was brought back to life. Personally, I've always been a little bit doubtful about those claims, because my understanding of death is that you don't come back from it. You certainly can't come back from it without divine intervention. Only the power of God can raise up one who is dead and make them to walk on the earth again. Only the power of God could bring Jesus back from the dead, and as such, make it so that Christ is the firstborn from the dead, as he is described in the book of Colossians. The idea behind that moniker is that Jesus was the first to be raised from the dead who never died again. All these people that we read about here in Matthew who came back to life on the day Jesus died, they all would have died again eventually. Don't know how long they lived on the earth. Frankly, it's irrelevant. But Jesus was the only one who came back to life and stayed alive and did not go back into death, thus paving the way for all of us. Because on the resurrection day, we will be brought forth in newness of life, never to die again. Thank you for the question.
Thank you for that good answer to Brother Olbricht. The person asks, what does Isaiah 4:1 mean when it says 7 women shall take hold of one man in that day? Brother Olbricht.
I like this question because it kind of highlights something that is important in our studies of the Scriptures. As we read Isaiah 4 and verse 1, in that day 7 women shall take hold of one man, saying, we will eat our own food and wear our own apparel, only let us be called by your name to take away our reproach. Okay, so what's going on? Why do we find this, and why do we find it at the beginning of a chapter? This is the opening statement of this chapter. Well, one thing I like to tell people and encourage people to do is when you come across a passage that you don't understand, look at what came before and even what comes after. Now, sometimes you can do that with 2 or 3 verses. Sometimes you have to go a couple of chapters even. And that's really what we find here with Isaiah 4 and verse 1. If you go all the way back to the start of chapter 2, you find in those first 5 verses God prophesying through Isaiah of the coming of the kingdom and of the glory of the kingdom. And then beginning in chapter 2 and verse 6, he begins telling them of the judgment that is coming against Jerusalem. And he tells them it's because of idolatry. It's because of their lack of faithfulness. And then he begins to describe what all is going to happen. These were going to be very hard times during this period. People were going to be going and running and hiding, and there were going to be a lot of the men who were killed in this battle that was going to take place. And as we come to the end of chapter 3, we find the description of the women of Jerusalem living in their heyday, living in beauty and in splendor and in riches, and all of that is going to go away. And as we close out chapter 3, the last verses of chapter 3 says, "Your men shall fall by the sword, and your mighty men in the war." Isaiah 3 and verse 25. That's when we read chapter 4 and verse 1. "In that day 7 women shall take hold of one man." Things were going to be so desperate in Jerusalem because of the judgment of God, because of their idolatry. Thank you very much for this question.
Thanks to each of these brethren. They've done a great job all month, and we really appreciate it. When a couple left for vacation, their newly married son and daughter-in-law promised to watch the house and take in the mail and keep the lawn mowed. Well, the couple hadn't been gone very long before they began to worry. What if they were careless about locking the doors and everything got stolen? Or what if they didn't pick up the mail and some of the checks were stolen out of the box? And what if the lawn wasn't mowed? What would the neighbors think? And so on. And they nearly ruined their vacation with worry. In fact, they even cut it short a few days and came home early. Of course, when they came home, they found the lawn mowed, the mail was taken care of, the house was in perfect order. And then they realized how foolish they had been because their children had kept their word. You know, that's the way it is with God. God keeps His word. That brings us great comfort, helps to free us from worry. Every promise of God will be kept. You can count on it. Thanks so much for watching A Bible Answer today, and remember, for your Bible questions, there's always a Bible answer.
We would love to hear from you, our viewers. If you have questions for A Bible Answer, or if you'd like any of the material offered on this program, please contact us at the address on the screen. We appreciate all of our supporters, and we encourage you to worship with a faithful Church of Christ in your area.